Hello everybody, my name is the Holy Apple and welcome back to a new video. So with the Witch Queen being out for about 8 weeks now, I feel like a lot of players would have had sufficient time to experience it for themselves, including the new raid. So I figure I'd throw my own opinion into the mix and break down what I like and dislike about the DLC and what it actually brought to the table. So let's start with the elephant in the room, weapon crafting. Weapon crafting has been introduced in a very good way in my eyes, as it hasn't made the previous weapons redundant as I was fearing it might, but instead introduced a new variety of weapons for us to get in a completely different way. But what I do actually like about this is that they stuck to a similar system like with how you can earn planetary materials, so you can basically get the weapon crafting materials by completing deep stone resonance on weapons, which are the ones with the red borders around them, which have a chance to drop within any activity, with certain weapons being able to craft it when you do enough of the deep stone resonances. And I'm also quite a fan of where the patterns is located, because they've actually merged it into where the catalyst section is, so it's bundled together nice and neat and tidily. Now naturally this is very grindy, but considering that the craftable weapons can be obtained through most activities in the throne world and with the Season of the Risen activities, it isn't actually too bad to acquire them all despite it taking a fair bit of time. Let's just not talk about the raid craftables because that is just a whole new kettle of fish. Speaking of the raid however, Bungie did an absolutely fantastic job with the entire thing, ranging from the new symbols to arguably the best raid boss so far, Rook. Breaking down the raid into parts however, we will start with the entrance, which is basically kill Savathun's clone to open the gate and then escort the payload. It's very simple to understand and generally a nice start to the whole raid. It's very nice just to ease yourself into the raid itself, and you get immersed into the entire world around you as you go through it. Next though, we have the first encounter where the symbols are introduced, and I got Last Wish vibes all over again in this section. Doing the runner roll in this encounter is definitely the most fun, and memorising the symbols is the biggest advantage for the entirety of the raid. The second encounter coming up with Mr. Chunky himself, the Caretaker. Originally, I hated this encounter so much because I was always the runner, and I always thought that you needed 3 symbols in order to activate the obelisk. But it turns out you don't need 3 symbols, you can do it with 1 or 2, as per the challenge is literally run it 1 at a time. So you can imagine my hatred when I found this out. But I will say the Caretaker was an absolute monster in contest mode, as I was able to determine he actually has around 20 million HP in contest mode. Ultimately I did end up beating him, but my lord it was tough. Third encounter time, and easily the one part I disliked the most about the raid, just because it requires so much coordination, and even for experienced players this is an area where you're very likely to wipe a few times. Saying that though, I do like how Bungie utilised 2 relics from previous raids and threw in a third one just to make something unique as a dynamic. And finally we move on to the Rook boss fight. The mechanics to get to DPS are fun and again rely on good communication between the team, and the fact that Rook walks around to shatter bubbles and contest wells is a massive plus in my eyes. Bungie, more of this. Now we will talk about the throne world. The design is absolutely incredible, from the dark and dingy swaps to the majestic lucent hive areas, but I will also mention it manages to avoid a massive issue that happened in Beyond Light, which was one zone was very far away from where the spawn point was on Europa, so unless you'd beat the campaign you wouldn't unlock the second fast travel all the way at the top. But when the DLC first came out, that fast travel point at the top didn't exist, so you would have to go from the bottom of the map all the way to the top. And this would easily be 2 minutes on Sparrow just to get to the top area. Never mind then going into Reese Reborn and all that, which is even further into it. But it's really nice to see the throne world doesn't have that problem, because you can spawn on one side of the map and you can probably reach the other edge of the map within 2 minutes by Sparrow, and that's included going to the extended areas as well. Another addition as well is I really like the design of the lost sectors. Despite the fact that they are all caves, it is a nice touch having these dark and mysterious zones when you have this bright lucent hive area up above ground. And that's not to mention the altars that are underground as well, which is adding another layer onto an already amazing world map. Moving on to the Wellspring Activity. Originally I really liked this activity, but much like with how I felt about Override, Astral Alignment and the Psyops missions, it just feels like an unnecessary grind fest. In my eyes, you should be guaranteed a deep sight resonance weapon on the first clear of the day and have an increasing chance thereafter. So for example, the first couple of times you may not get one, but you'll slowly accumulate this chance of getting one as you clear it more and more on that day. But the reason I say that is because I've had a few occasions where I remember grinding it for 2 or 3 hours and I would only get 1 red, and despite that I'd only get the 1 red, that would be considered lucky by some players. That aside however, I really do like the changing end boss with it rotating between attack and defend, so it technically becomes 2 different activities. I would like to see Bungie keep doing that kind of thing, where it's the same sort of layout of a map, but the activity changes on a daily basis. But moving on to the preservation mission and strikes. I'm doing these as a pair because there isn't a great deal to talk about when it comes to these, but I really do like how the preservation mission was done, as it's like a light introduction to the start of the raid, with it being its own independent mission at the same time. I would personally love to see Bungie make missions like this that go through the entirety of a raid, but instead of it being the raid bosses and encounters, you actually have like slightly altered bosses and encounters, but still relate to the raid. So kind of like doing it in dungeon form, if that makes sense. I personally just think it'd be really good for players who can't mass up a team of 6 to do a raid. It would give them like the experience of the raid map, but in a dungeon format. But shifting over to the new strikes that have been added, these are definitely a notch above what we have at the moment, with the addition of the Lucent Hive making it have an extra challenge as well. And then the amazing art style just makes these strikes absolutely top notch again. I love running these strikes when I first experienced them, and I still don't mind doing them on repeat today because they're still very engaging. Like, seriously, Bungie's art department better have received a raise for the work they've done on Witch Queen because it is absolutely phenomenal. But leaving the best for last, the campaign. And oh my god, this was so good to run through on Legendary. It's a perfect blend of challenge and story content that Destiny really needed. I personally really enjoyed the Beyond Light campaign the first time round, but the Witch Queen's campaign is just a masterpiece in comparison, and it was one that was optimistically looking forward to running again with 2 other characters, and that was after helping other guys that I play with go through on the Legendary campaign, so I think at that point I must have ran it 3 times already, if not 4, and I was considering to do it 2 more times on Legendary difficulty. It is so good. My favourite moments from that campaign, and yes, this is a spoiler warning, I would suggest just skipping forward to the next section of the video if you do not want it to be spoiled. But my favourite moment was easily when I saw the Ahamkara come through the portal. Like, that actually sent shivers down my spine when I first encountered it on Legendary, because I was running it solo at the time, and I remember just sitting back and going, oh god, this is actually going to happen. I was a little bit disappointed in a way, I got to admit though, because I was really looking forward to maybe having like a Riven rematch kind of idea. Obviously not to the degree of the Riven fight itself, but I would have loved to have seen like some symbols pop up around the map, and let's say the Ahamkara's eyes flash a certain symbol, like you have to go to where that symbol is to deal damage to it. That would have been like a really interesting twist, and it would bring back some Last Wish vibes as well. But that's just my opinion, it was still a fantastic moment for me. The second best bit for me had to be the entire Savathûn encounter. Like, it just fit together and flowed so well, from when you first meet Savathûn and do the big bulk of damage to her, and then you get the 3 Hive Guardians spawning and you have to kill all 3 of them before you keep fighting Savathûn. That encounter on its own is brilliant, and then not to mention you have to then go forward, you get cutscenes in fights, to which like reveal more of the lore of the story and how Savathûn's thinking. But then you actually go up into the main fight itself, and it just feels amazing, because especially on Legendary, by the way, this is like a challenging fight in itself just to do normally. On Legendary it makes it even bigger of a challenge, but at the same time it's so engaging, it's so good, and I felt really satisfied actually beating Savathûn at the end. But I have to say, I would have liked to have seen the ending a little bit differently, because it would have made me feel a lot better if Savathûn like faded away or disappeared like an illusion, because then you'd be wondering where Savathûn is for like the rest of the seasons all the way up to Lightfall. But I suppose Amara being taken away by the Traveller or disappearing, whichever one it was, that's also good enough because it does imply that Savathûn might be able to be revived later on. Overall though, The Witch Queen is a solid DLC and definitely worth buying if you don't own it already. The campaign alone feels like a new game, and everything that comes with it is just a massive bonus. And I don't know about you, but I really cannot wait to see what Bungie will cook up in Lightfall following this. But I'm definitely expecting another Legendary campaign, as well as a new world to explore and roam around in. I'm kind of getting the idea of maybe some kind of rift between light and dark. That would be really interesting to see. But who knows. I'm just very excited to see what they're going to do with this though. Of course, there's a lot of content to come before we get to the Lightfall, but for the Witch Queen, top-notch DLC. Definitely go get it, it's fantastic. But that is it for me, thank you all for watching, and I will see you all in the next video.